I don't know what to think. I'm genuinely confused, a mixture of emotions. What did I just read? A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas is both a thrilling and yet a sensual, confusing experience. I think those are the best words to describe this book. Take it from me, or don't take it from me, because this is not usually my cup of tea. I am a fantasy guy. I like to read a lot, and I read a lot of fantasy. And a coworker had, really suggested that I check out this book. You're going to like it. It may be a little different from what you're used to, but give it a shot. And so I enter this sort of tenuous realm full of fairies, fairy porn, and tenacity from the main character to figure out what's happening here. Like, the intrigue does start sort of immediately as Feyre, the protagonist of this epic world, is thrust into a role where she is the provider for her family. In this grim sort of setting where she's going out, it's very much, got some evil sisters, or at least one sister that seems to be very anti-her, and a lazy family, including a father who, fell from graces. And Feyre is thrust into this life of being a provider. She goes out and she hunts and comes across this wolf who seems a little sus, and she decides to kill it. And that sort of leads to a cascade of events that sends Feyre into a realm that is very, very different from hers. And she's introduced to her soon-to-be lover, Tamlin. And I got a lot to say about Tammy Boy. We'll get there, of course. But I have a lot of thoughts on the structure of this book, how it's paced, some of the tropes, the good and the bad. Was it entertaining? Absolutely. Was it a page turner? Absolutely. Could it have been stronger? Absolutely. And talk about toxic relationships, right? So Tammy Boy thrusts in. What an entrance. I'm using the word thrust a lot. Maybe Sarah J. Maas is really, her innuendos are rubbing off on me. But he comes in the door, breaks down the front door to Feyre's sort of home where her family subsides after she has killed this wolf, who turns out to be a high fae, right? Or a fairy. And Tammy Boy is affronted by this. And this is where my spidey senses started tingling, because I was like, okay, I like plot devices, but I like them when they're done well. And all we know about Tamlin so far is that he's this powerful force. And he comes and essentially gives Feyre a deal. He says, you've killed a High Lord, essentially, in my realm. And as payment, as retribution, I'm going to need you to come with me. And I'll take care of your family, but you're going to come with me to pay your debt. And, already I'm going, I don't know, this feels a little uncomfortable. It just feels like a very convenient way to sort of transport a character to another plot line. And it felt a little forced in that sense. Now, there are reasons that you find out later in the story for why Tamlin did this. But that bothered me initially, for sure, as a book reader. I just felt, this could have been handled in a better way. But essentially, Feyre is taken from her family. They put up really no resistance. Her father, oh my God, sickens me. He's like, oh, take her, protect our family. You need to go, protect yourself. And she's taken across the wall into, the Spring Court, which is one of many courts in this world, and introduced to a cast of characters. Now, at this moment in time, Feyre cannot see many of them, right? She's not high fae. She, spoiler alert, for those who've not finished the first book. But so it's this beautiful, beautiful transcendent world. Trees, and it looks like something out of an MMO you might play. And she is essentially stuck there with Tamlin and his friend named Lucian. I do like Lucian. I've got a soft spot for the guy. And she has no free will. No free will at all. She is very, very defiant, and for good reason. For good reason. I mean, she's just been taken against her will into a fantasy world where there's fairies walking about. And not to mention, these guys have masks on. You know, it's part of this big, grandiose curse where their people have masks and they can't be stripped off. And we'll find out more about that later as the story progresses. This is what I would call sort of the first sort of hurdle for Feyre. She needs to figure out, is she going to trust these fairies? Who, by the way, are emoted as sort of monster-esque but beautiful creatures. And it does have a very pornographic feel to it at times. You know, the way these talons come out, but then, you know, these descriptions of the male body and form. I mean, Feyre's inner monologue is essentially just like a walking catalog for like describing men's bodies. Now, I do understand the target audience. Did I keep reading? Of course. But it's a choice for sure, stylistically. And I'm not necessarily against that choice either. I think it does add a little bit of intrigue. You know, even when a so-and-so called evil character busts through the door as well, sort of apparates, if you will. But even when Rysand enters the story, you know, an emissary this time, or a high lord from the Night Court, who up until now we have just thought of as an evil sort of presence, he busts in, and her first reaction is, "That's the most beautiful man I've ever seen," with some descriptions as well. Now, some of that could have been charm, and you know, I think you could lead that up to, you could chalk that up to, she's just mortal at this point, and fairies are using their charm to create visions of themselves that the mortal would not have any ability to sort of negate or defy in terms of how they viewed someone. Basically what I'm trying to say is everyone's looking very sexy. Very, very sexy. All right, let's talk about Tamlin. Now, Tamlin is someone who is obviously being set up to be a protagonist, someone that is going to eminently become a love interest for Feyre. If you can't see that when you start, I don't know if you have any experience in the world of love, but you often hate the person you're going to fall in love with. At least that's the trope in fantasy, right? You're like, this person sucks. They're beautiful, but they suck. And it doesn't really take that long for Feyre to just sort of give in to this sort of carnal desire. And there's a lot of hints that Tamlin is also interested in Feyre. So there's sort of this meandering sort of arc for, 100, 200 pages where there's this resistance between both characters. Tamlin's like, hey, I ripped you out of your world. I've locked you up in my castle. Have fun. Like, this is heaven for you, right? And Feyre's like, dude, what the hell, man? Like, this is not awesome. Like, please take me back. I have to provide for my family. Like, I'm really worried about my father, et cetera, et cetera. And then some more, sort of storylines start opening up. Lucian takes her hunting. There's some jealousy when he does that. Feyre starts to prove herself and realize the dangers and perils that exist in this realm, in the Spring Court itself, but also in the world as of large. And she starts to begin to see that there are cracks in this perfect land, right? And that it's not just rosy, and maybe she has a role to play that's bigger than herself, that's bigger than humanity. Now, I will give Sarah J. Maas a lot of credit. She's very creative in finding ways to introduce characters and create tension, especially violence and sensual tension, sort of seamlessly. One example of that is, a couple weeks or maybe a month into after Feyre has sort of arrived and has been, telling Tamlin she wants to leave, and then eventually, inevitably falling in love with Tamlin, Tamlin lays it upon her like, hey, baby, there's this ritual that happens. I want you to lock yourself in your room. Don't worry about it. Like, just, it's fine. Just please don't come out of your room. Essentially, women are going to throw themselves at me, but it's chill. It's fine. This happens all the time. Callen May is what it's called, but it's fine. Like, you wouldn't understand. You're human. So just please don't come out of your room. Please. I'm about to get into some stuff. Anyways, of course, Feyre leaves her room. Like, duh. And as a novelist, how could you not have your main character defy Tamlin and go see what's up? Because let's be honest, man, we need to figure out what Tamlin's going to do there. She arrives at this sort of fairy-esque festival, which is like a worshiping thing where people from different lands come and arrive, and there's this like, you know, rhythmic sort of joining of the earth with Tamlin, and all of that happens through like intercourse. But this is the first time that Feyre meets a man named Rysand, which I mentioned earlier, and I like to call him Riz because he's got Riz. So that should say everything. But basically, he appears out of nowhere and saves Feyre from venturing into this crowd and being taken away by other fairies to probably be assaulted or something terrible. So props to Riz. I was already like a big fan of this guy. But yeah, he shows up immediately. Like I said earlier, you know, Feyre is looking at this man like, wow, I've got the hots for him. He's evil, but he's the most beautiful man I've heard. Listen to a couple of these quotes. They were strong hands, warm and broad. There you are. I've been looking for you, said a deep, sensual male voice. Standing before me was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. Everything about the stranger radiated sensual grace and ease. I mean, she's really, really talking this man up. Like, if he needs a PR woman, it's going to be Feyre. These quotes are fire, right? Let's just pretend for a second that there are dating profiles in this world. Well, wouldn't you say this is good? His clothes, all black, all finely made, were cut close enough to his body that I could see how magnificent he was, as if he'd been made from the night itself. I mean, enough said. Like, I'm sold. This guy's dope. Anyways, he's there. Sarah J. Maas does a great job sort of intertwining the events of course, Feyre's intrigue about where her lover is that night, a perpetual doom that might happen to her if she gets caught, and then sort of an evil character coming in, or at least someone that we don't trust yet, coming in from the Night Court and being described in this sort of sensual but very, very intriguing way. Again, I thought that was well done. I should add, though, that he is this supernatural man that gives off very terrible qualities in a person, so I'm actually not condoning that, but I wanted to throw that in there. So we move forward in the story after that. Feyre ends up falling for Tamlin and vice versa. They ravage each other, both violently and sexually, and consensually too. And the story progresses. And we really do find out more and more about the threats to the Spring Court and the terrible curse that has been placed upon the Spring Court by a woman named Amarantha. Now, more intrigue, right? Amarantha is described as this person that no one can say no to, all-powerful, sent out by, another foreign sort of threat, a king from a different land. But she's essentially been sent to this realm to lay siege to it and to keep everyone under her control. And she does this by being very out there and having sort of a dominatrix effect in a way, with both magic, power, and ability to just control people. And apparently, Rysand works for her and has been sort of enslaved by her. So already there, I like that a little bit, just because, someone that has been described as maybe evil, we see that it's not just one-sided. So after some threats to Feyre, Tamlin begins to become a little worried, as he should be, rightfully. And he essentially sends the love of his life back over the wall, back, and to her own realm, where she has trouble coping, has trouble coming to grips with the fact that she's lost her lover for life, and she now needs to become immortal again, essentially, and live a very, very meager life. And this obviously doesn't work. She sneaks back against the wall, or back through the wall, and finds that the kingdom that she had just left is in disarray. Tamlin's gone. No one's there. The only person that can direct her is the handmaid that had been taking care of Feyre this whole time. And the handmaiden basically says, oh yeah, Tamlin's actually with Amarantha. You're going to need to go save him. She actually doesn't say that. She's like, please don't do it. But, well, Sarah J. Maas, she moves plots along. So we follow this plot, and, I have to be a little critical, right? There is obviously a lot of thought that's gone into this, and how do we get one character from point A to point B? How do we progress the story along? But essentially, Feyre just goes through a little tunnel and arrives in Amarantha's lair. It's like a one-day journey. And she's caught, and Amarantha finds her, and that's where the story really unfolds. So like I said before, when it's good, it's good. It's a page-turner. I can't stop. I really think there was a lot of thought put into the world. But then we get to this point in the story, right, where it feels a little forced. It feels a little convenient. Here's a prime example. So, Feyre is captured and brought to Amarantha's court under this sort of mountain. It's dark. Amarantha looks evil. And Tamlin is sitting there silent. He has just been silenced. He cannot say a word. He's obviously has a trickle of his real potential magic that he used to be able to control as High Fae. He's a shell of his former self. And until he's unleashed, he literally can't do anything to save the love of his life who's in front of him. And it's revealed to us that Tamlin's kind had a curse put on them by Amarantha. He had defied her. He had defied her by not wanting to give himself to her. He didn't find her attractive, basically. And Amarantha was pissed off about this. She was like, look, if you're not going to be with me, then get the hell out of here. No, but really, she's like, all right, well, I'm just going to curse your whole kind. You're going to have these silly masks put on you, and you're basically going to look dumb forever, and you're never going to be able to attract anyone else. Not really working for her in that regard, but at least she's accomplished in embarrassing them. And essentially, Feyre is sitting there like, ooh, what did I just walk into? So we find out what the curse is. And the curse is this. Essentially, Tamlin has 7 years times 7, so essentially 50 years to find a mortal that hates High Fae, that hates them, that loathes their kind. Okay, fine. But will fall in love with Tamlin. And Tamlin, it's revealed, had sent out emissary after emissary to try to accomplish this. And here comes Feyre at the very last minute, after essentially the deal is about to be broken. He had almost given up. All these emissaries had died or not come back. And Feyre is the one that ends up falling in love with him. And if she had just said, I love you, to Tamlin, all of this could have been avoided. But she didn't say that. She was sent back over the wall before this all happened. And essentially Tamlin's now enslaved by Amarantha. And so we find out that had this curse been lifted, those masks would fade away, and a lot of those problems that the High Court had been keeping at bay would naturally fade. So shame on you, Feyre, for not figuring that out. But really, what ends up happening next is a couple of plot devices get introduced to us. And that's where I start to feel like this story gets wrapped up in a very convenient way. But essentially, Amarantha says, hey, I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself, Feyre. I'm going to set 3 impossible tasks for you. And if you complete them, I'm going to free Tamlin and you can be with him. okay? And the curse is lifted. And I'm sitting there as the reader, like, why would you ever do this? This is like that meme, whenever you have your villain in a fantasy novel or a TV show, they could just walk away and just be done with it. But they like to toy with their prey. And that's what ends up happening here. Amarantha cannot resist toying with her prey. And maybe that tracks. But she sets out these 3 tasks for Feyre to complete. And TLDR, Feyre completes them. And Amarantha is actually killed by Feyre. And it turns into a major, major win for her. I mean, essentially, she is a phoenix rising from the ashes, or she hands that to Tamlin, who is able to restore his magical powers and become the boss he's always been inside. Okay? And he rises from the ashes, really, figuratively and literally. And that's all thanks to Feyre. And that's really cool and all. And during all of that, she forms sort of this like pseudo alliance with Rysand, who had like been keeping her and like giving her, he gave her this weird tattoo, which we'll get into in the next book. But it's all kind of convenient, but also satisfying at the same time. We actually learn at the very end that Feyre is like raised to high fae, like they make her high fae because she had literally been dead. So they do this like CPR thing on her, and they're like, all right, she's been dead, asystole, let's just work together and bring her back and give her magical powers. So as Feyre is resurrected and given all of these high fae properties and powers, we start to realize, oh, this is the beginning of the story. And so that's where I'm giving Sarah J. Maas a lot of credit. It was very readable. It was very, very hard to put down. And a lot of effort went into sort of describing the systems in terms of how the courts interact with each other, the threats that are at large and that loom over the world that she's created. And I think it's easy for a reader to feel the gravity of that and to feel like, okay, I'm invested. I want to see where this goes. I mean, even at the very end of the book, we start to feel and learn that humanity is threatened, right? They are going to be probably slaughtered. There's a lot of foreshadowing there. Faye had previously basically accidentally sacrificed someone she knew from over the wall back in Mortal Land, and Amarantha had slayed them. Anyways, shit's going whack, basically. But we can all see how this is going to be laid out in the future. And so that's one of the strengths that I see. The convenience factor throughout the books was one of the negatives, but I think they pair okay together. And so the overall impression I have as a reader is this is a decent piece of fantasy. Okay, let's wrap this up. I enjoyed it. That's my actual takeaway. I think that this was a very clever book designed to really captivate readers of all ages. There was enough there for me to sink my teeth into, and that goes a long way. I mean, it was sensual at times, it was violent at times, it was intriguing at times, and I know that there's so much potential for this series moving forward. I'm a huge fan of Tolkien. I'm a huge fan of Robert Jordan, of Brandon Sanderson, some of the fantasy greats, and I'm hoping that Sarah J. Maas outlines a vision for her books in regards to culture and language and lore. I'd love to see more of that. And not to discount the things I think she really excels at, making you care about relationships between people, creating witty dialogue, and visions of sort of what the lands look like. Where I thought it was lacking at times was just certain plot devices that we've already gone over. But overall, I did think it was a fun read, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So I wanted to thank you for coming along this journey with me on the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I will definitely be doing the next one soon. Just a quick reminder to leave me a comment. I'm sure you have some feedback for me in terms of things I've missed. Please make sure to subscribe and like this video. I would love that, and I do appreciate your support, and I cannot wait to see you next time.